I'm Rob from B&H, and this video is the second half of our DJ Basics 2-parter. Now in the first part, we checked out a typical DJ rig and explored how the mixer works. So now we're going to talk about some basic techniques. Nothing fancy here, just the fundamentals of mixing using beat matching and EQ. So the joint is jumping and the warm-up DJ has just put his last record on, and now it's your turn. Where to start? Well, Johnny Warm-Up left us with a pretty nifty 128 BPM groove playing from this deck on this channel on the mixer, and I want to mix my next track into it at the same tempo. So the track we're bringing in is on the other deck, which comes up on this channel. So one very important thing to make sure of is that the fader on this channel is down so the audience doesn't hear me cueing it up. Now my file is at 126 beats per minute, so we want to speed it up a bit. The CDJ 2000 Nexus 2s have tempo displays, so without even hearing what's going on, I can match the tempos pretty closely. And in fact, many decks like this one allow you to automatically sync the decks if they're connected via a LAN cable and you've prepared your tracks at home before the gig using software, in this case Pioneer's Rekordbox software. But while automatic beat sync is very helpful, freeing you up to work the EQs and faders for super smooth transitions, it won't save you if you don't know what you're doing, and it isn't always an option. It's certainly not an option if you're playing vinyl, so let's sync these cuts manually. Now while the previous cut continues to play, I need to cue up our next one in the headphones. Our next track begins with a minimal drum intro, so I'm going to set the cue or the start point on the first beat. Now if you watched part 1 of this video, you will recall that the cue button routes the selected channel to the headphones. In the headphones, I play the track, and when I hear the first beat, I immediately press pause on the deck. While the track is in pause mode, I use the wheel to rewind and park just before the first drum hit, and then I press the cue button. This is called the back cue, and now every time I hit the cue button, playback stops and the deck will return to this cue point. Now note that most jog wheels have 2 modes. In CDJ mode, the outer section and the top of the jog wheel can be used for pitch bends, while in vinyl mode, pressing the top of the wheel will slow and then stop playback on the deck, allowing you to do scratching effects, but you can still do pitch bends on the sides. Getting back to our mix, to hear the cut that's playing for the audience, I can play it through the booth speakers and listen with one ear while hearing my new cut in the cue with my other ear. Alternatively, or if I don't have speakers in the booth, I can add the mix the audience is hearing to the headphones by adjusting the blend knob. Now to match the tempos, I trigger playback on the new tune when I hear the first beat of a bar from the cut that's already playing. Since my new tune is slower, they're going to go out of sync pretty quickly. So I use the tempo fader to speed up my new tune so it's playing at the same speed. And I can nudge the tempo forward or back a bit to lock the groove in place so the 2 cuts are both tempo matched and beat matched. Again, the new cut is playing only in my headphones, so if I don't get it right, I can just hit the cue button and keep trying, at least until the track the audience is hearing ends. Now before we mix in the new track, let's consider a couple of things. The range of the tempo slider is adjustable, and if I activate the master tempo button, I can adjust the speed of the track without changing the pitch. But to make this happen, the deck has to do time stretching on the fly, so the sound quality can suffer a bit. Obviously, the tighter the sync is, the longer the tracks will stay locked, allowing me to mix in the new track more seamlessly. Now the sync button and the BPM counter can make this a lot easier, but it's a good idea to get away from relying on those and mix by ear. And of course, if you're mixing vinyl, there is no sync button. Again, if my tempos are very close, but I can feel them starting to go out of sync, I can temporarily nudge the playback speed a bit with the jog wheel or the nudge buttons. Now with vinyl, the beat matching process is pretty similar, but since you can't pause a turntable, queuing it up is a bit different and requires a slip mat. When I find the beat I want to start with, I park the needle right in front of it. Now just before I'm ready to mix it in, I start playback on the turntable, but the slip mat allows me to hold the record in place while the platter spins underneath. And when I'm ready for the track to start, I simply release the record. I adjust the tempo with the slider, and I can manually nudge the record by putting my finger on the label and pushing it forward or slowing it down. So having beat matched our two cuts, it's a good idea to think about when I might want to start my new song for maximum effectiveness. Since most dance music is in 4/4 time, song arrangements are often structured in multiples of 4 or 8, so the intro might run 32 bars, then another section for 64 bars, maybe a break lasts 16 bars, you get the idea. So for example, if there's a break right before the outro, I can start playback on my new track at the beginning of the outro, or maybe 8 or 16 bars later. And as the arrangement of my old track gets increasingly sparse during its outro, the arrangement of my new track will get busier as its intro builds, and the tunes should transition nicely. Okay, so let's mix in the new cut. Everyone has their own style of mixing, and I'm by no means a virtuoso, but here's a few basic moves that work for me, especially for house and techno sets. First of all, if I have a club record with a lot of bass blazing away, and I just bring up the fader on the new cut, chances are that I'll end up overloading the mix with too much low end, and/or the transition will be a loud, hot mess. Now, if I set the crossfader curve to dip, and I start with it all the way on the side of the track that's playing, then I can carefully crossfade over to the new cut, and the dip in volume when the fader is in the center will compensate for the volume increase from having both tracks playing during the transition. This method can work quite well for some tracks, but often the transitions can be a bit messy, especially in the low-end frequencies. I find it easier and more elegant to use the EQ. Most club tracks are structured to remove elements as the outro winds down, often in the mid and the high frequencies. So if I remove all or much of the bass frequencies on the new track, there's usually a lot of sonic room for the mids and the highs from the new record. Now as I bring up the fader, I'm only adding mid and high frequencies from the new track. Then I can dial in the bass from the new track when I want. Now in that mix, you can see me nudging the deck as the cuts go out of sync just a little bit. And again, by using Rekordbox and an Ethernet cable, I could use the auto sync function and focus only on the mixing aspects, as the decks will stay perfectly in sync without me having to worry about them. Before we wrap it up, some mixers, like the Zone 43C, include filters and effect sends. You can think of a filter as a radical EQ, and I can set this one to filter out the highs, the lows, or both around a sweepable band. The resonance control adds overtones to color the sound of the filter, but be careful because it can be a bit harsh at loud volumes if you overuse it. Finally, this mixer also has an effect send. So if I have an outboard effects processor, like this Korg Chaos Pad, I can add special effects like reverb, delay, flanging, etc. by dialing it in here. That's a bit beyond the basics of DJing, which we're covering in these videos, so it's probably a good place for us to wrap it up. I'm Rob from B&H, and thanks for watching.